Film 1, Triumph of the Will, 1935. Let's start with a film that remains one of the most controversial ever shot, Triumph of the Will. Directed by Leni Riefenstahl, it's often called the most dangerous film in history. Why? Because it turned a political rally into a hypnotic spectacle that still influences the way movies are filmed today. Imagine the year is 1934, Nuremberg. Tens of thousands of people fill a massive field, not just gathered, but choreographed. The camera doesn't just record, it soars. Riefenstahl used cranes, hidden tracks, and even custom-built towers to capture sweeping aerial shots that made the crowd look endless, unstoppable. This was cinema as architecture. And for the first time, viewers weren't just watching history, they were swallowed by it. Here's the twist. While the content served a regime's propaganda machine, the techniques became immortal. Hollywood borrowed them, newsreels copied them, even modern concerts and sports broadcasts owe a debt to the fluid motion and scale that Riefenstahl pioneered. In other words, the tools of spectacle born in Triumph of the Will didn't die with its ideology. They lived on, shaping blockbuster cinema across decades. But here's where it gets chilling. Critics still debate, can you separate art from intent? If a film changes cinema forever, does it matter if it was made for manipulation? That question keeps Triumph of the Will locked in a paradox, one of cinema's greatest technical triumphs and one of its darkest shadows. So the next time you see a dramatic crane shot sweeping over a stadium or a hero framed against a massive crowd, ask yourself, are you watching innovation or are you still watching the ghost of Nuremberg? Film 2, Olympia, 1938. If Triumph of the Will was the storm, Olympia was the calm before it. Again, directed by Leni Riefenstahl, this documentary on the 1936 Berlin Olympics changed the way sports and cinema were filmed forever. Imagine cameras diving underwater with swimmers, lenses capturing javelins slicing through the air in slow motion. Athletes turned into living statues with lighting so sharp it made their muscles look carved from marble. This wasn't just sport, it was mythology painted on film. Riefenstahl pioneered techniques we still take for granted. Tracking shots that followed athletes mid-sprint, telephoto lenses that pulled the viewer into the heat of competition, and carefully edited montages that made human movement look like poetry. For the first time, audiences didn't just watch the Olympics, they felt them. And here's the kicker. The world fell under the spell. Even critics who despised the politics couldn't deny the artistry. Hollywood cinematographers studied her framing. Television sports broadcasts built their entire grammar on these techniques. From the Super Bowl to the Olympics you watched last year, the DNA runs straight back to Olympia. But the legacy carries a razor edge. Can beauty be innocent when it's born from power? Olympia remains both a celebration of the human form and a reminder of how cinema can be weaponized, wrapped in elegance. It's a film that seduces you, then forces you to question why you're enchanted in the first place. Film 3, Kolberg, 1945. Now we move to Kolberg, a movie made not in triumph, but in desperation. Picture it, 1945. Germany is collapsing, cities are burning, and resources are vanishing. Yet somehow, in the middle of chaos, one of the largest and most expensive films of the era was shot. Directed by Veit Harlan, Kolberg retold a centuries-old story of ordinary citizens defending their town against invaders. But this wasn't history. It was theater designed to convince a defeated nation to keep fighting. Tens of thousands of soldiers were pulled off the front lines, not to fight, but to march as extras in this cinematic illusion. The irony is brutal. While real bombs fell across Europe, Kolberg staged explosions on carefully constructed sets. While families starved, vast amounts of grain were burned on screen to recreate a siege. It was propaganda pushed to its breaking point, a film that looked like victory while its makers lived in defeat. When the film premiered in early 1945, hardly anyone saw it. Transportation was shattered, theaters were gone, and the war was days from ending. Yet the movie remains a haunting relic. It's proof that cinema can be a last gasp, a regime's final attempt to control reality, even as the world collapses around it. Today, Kolberg is studied less as art and more as evidence of how far cinema will go to build illusions, even on the edge of ruin. Film 4, The Murderers Are Among Us, 1946. Berlin, 1946. The war is over, but the city looks like the aftermath of an apocalypse. Rubble where streets once stood, shadows where homes used to rise, And into this haunted landscape came The Murderers Are Among Us, the very first German film released after the war. Directed by Wolfgang Stout, it wasn't just cinema, it was confession. The story follows a traumatized doctor who recognizes a former Nazi officer now living freely without remorse. The film whispers a question Germany wasn't ready to answer. What do you do when the monsters of yesterday walk the streets of today? Shot in real bombed-out locations, the film carried a rawness no set could fake. Actors stood in ruins that smelled of dust and ashes. The camera didn't just capture drama, it captured truth. Every shattered wall, every hollow window frame became part of the story. What made the film revolutionary wasn't only its honesty, but its defiance. In an era when silence was safer, Stauta dared to confront guilt. The censors of the Allied powers hesitated. Should Germans be allowed to see this reflection so soon? They allowed it, and audiences were stunned. Some wept, some turned away, but none forgot. The Murderers Are Among Us cracked open the door to cinematic reckoning. It was the first of the Trümmerfilme, or rubble films, movies born from destruction, forcing a nation to face its scars. And in doing so, it gave cinema a new power, not to glorify, but to confront. Film 5, Rotation, 1949. If The Murderers Are Among Us asked about guilt, Rotation asked about complicity. Directed once again by Wolfgang Stout, this film looked deeper, asking, how does an ordinary man become part of extraordinary crimes? The story follows a humble printer who, under pressure and fear, becomes entangled with the Nazi regime. He isn't a villain in the usual sense. He's a man who wanted stability, who convinced himself that compromise was survival. But compromise has a cost, and by the film's end, the price is unbearable. Shot in East Germany by DIFA Studios, Rotation marked the birth of a new kind of political cinema. It wasn't about spectacle. It wasn't about grand battles. It was about choices. Small, quiet, devastating choices. Did you keep your head down? Did you sign a paper? Did you stay silent? The camera forced the audience to confront those questions. What made Rotation groundbreaking is that it didn't paint Germans as pure victims or pure villains. It showed the gray zones, the cracks where morality faltered. In doing so, it dared to accuse an entire society of looking the other way. This wasn't comfortable cinema. It wasn't designed to entertain. It was designed to remember and to warn. And in that stark honesty, it redefined how war stories could be told. Not from the battlefield, but from the kitchen table, the office desk, the quiet compromises that shape history. Film 6, Der Untertan, the Kaiser's Lackey, 1955. If Rubble Films asked Germans to face guilt, Der Untertan took it a step further. It laughed at the roots of that guilt. Directed by Wolfgang Stauda, this East German classic was razor-sharp satire disguised as entertainment. The film follows Dietrich Hessling, a cowardly man who worships authority, bends to power, and bullies those weaker than himself. He's a parody, but he's also uncomfortably familiar. Through his life, Stauta painted a portrait of a society obsessed with obedience, a society that decades later would follow orders into catastrophe. Audiences squirmed and chuckled, but the mirror was merciless. In every fawning gesture, in every puffed-up speech, they saw their own past. East German leaders embraced the film as proof of their moral superiority over the West, but the real brilliance lay in its universality. This wasn't just about one nation, it was about the dangers of blind loyalty anywhere. Technically, the film glittered with theatrical flair. Grand sets mocked imperial pomp, while intimate scenes exposed petty cruelty. It was cinema as scalpel, slicing through national myth with precision, and it cemented Stauda not only as Germany's cinematic conscience, but as one of the first filmmakers to weaponize satire against authoritarianism. In short, Der Untertan didn't just entertain, it dissected. It proved that laughter could be sharper than any bayonet. Film 7, Die Brücke, The Bridge, 1959. Now, from satire to tragedy, Die Brücke, or The Bridge, directed by Bernhard Wicki, is often hailed as one of the greatest anti-war films ever made. And it achieves that not with grand battles, but with heartbreakingly small ones. The story is devastating in its simplicity. In the final days of the war, a group of teenage boys are ordered to defend a bridge in their hometown. They're inexperienced, naive, and eager to prove themselves. To them, war still sounds like glory, but when the fighting comes, their innocence is obliterated. What sets the bridge apart is its brutal honesty. There are no heroes here, only victims. The camera lingers on the boys' faces, capturing the slow unraveling of their bravado into terror. The violence isn't spectacular. It's senseless. Every death feels like a waste, every bullet like an echo of futility. For German audiences in 1959, the impact was shattering. This wasn't propaganda. This wasn't even satire. This was grief carved into film. Parents saw their own sons in those boys. Survivors saw their own memories. And the message was inescapable. War devours youth, and the cost is unbearable. Internationally, The Bridge earned acclaim and recognition, marking a turning point in how war stories were told worldwide. It wasn't about strategy or leaders, it was about children, sacrificed on the altar of pride. Even today, The Bridge stands as a cinematic tombstone, a reminder that war doesn't create heroes, it destroys them. Film 8 Night and Fog in Germany, 1956. Sometimes, the most powerful German war films weren't German at all. Take Alain Resnais's Night and Fog, a French documentary from 1955 that confronted the horrors of concentration camps with unflinching clarity. When it reached German screens in 1956, it wasn't just a film, it was a reckoning. Audiences sat in stunned silence as images of abandoned camps merged with archival footage of atrocities. The narration was calm, almost clinical, but the effect was devastating. For many Germans, this was the first time such images were shown openly, without filters, without excuses. And here's where cinema did something extraordinary. Night and Fog forced a nation to face what it had tried to bury. Some theaters refused to screen it. Some politicians called for bans, claiming it reopened wounds. But the truth was simple. The wounds had never healed, and silence had never closed them. By confronting audiences with what many had seen but few had admitted, Night and Fog became a cinematic turning point in Germany. It showed that film could be more than art or propaganda. It could be testimony. And in doing so, it rewired the role of cinema in a country struggling to remember and to take responsibility. Film 9, Das Boot, 89. Fast forward to the 1980s. German cinema had changed, but one question lingered. Could a war film capture truth without glorifying it? Enter Das Boot, Wolfgang Petersen's submarine masterpiece. Claustrophobic doesn't even begin to describe it. Imagine being trapped in a steel tube hundreds of feet below the surface, surrounded by enemies, the walls sweating with condensation, the air thick with fear. That's Das Boot. Petersen shot it with documentary-level intensity. The camera slid through narrow corridors, ducking under pipes, pressing into the anxious faces of the crew. Every groan of metal, every depth charge above felt like a death sentence waiting to happen. Viewers didn't just watch the film, they lived inside it. What made Das Boot groundbreaking was its refusal to romanticize. The crew weren't caricatures of villains or heroes. They were young men, scared, homesick, clinging to life. Their victories felt hollow, their survival uncertain. In a genre long dominated by propaganda or spectacle, Das Boot brought brutal realism. International audiences were floored. Critics compared its tension to Hitchcock, its detail to documentary, and its humanity to the finest of dramas. Suddenly, a German war film wasn't just history, it was universal cinema, reshaping how the world saw both the conflict and the people caught inside it. Today, Das Boot stands as a towering achievement, a war film that traps you in silence, sweat, and fear, and doesn't let you go until the credits roll. Film 10, Downfall, Der Untergang, 2004. By 2004, German cinema had wrestled with propaganda, rubble, memory, and realism. But Downfall took the boldest step yet. It walked straight into Hitler's bunker. Directed by Oliver Hirschbiegel, the film recreated the dictator's final days with unnerving intimacy. Bruno Ganz's performance as Hitler became legendary, his trembling hands, explosive rages, and moments of eerie vulnerability. For the first time, German audiences saw Hitler not as a caricature, but as a man unraveling, and that was the controversy. Some critics argued that humanizing him was dangerous, that showing his weakness risked sympathy. Others countered that only by showing his humanity could cinema truly confront his evil. The debate raged, but the film's power was undeniable. Shot with claustrophobic precision, the bunker scenes dripped with paranoia. Generals whispered, secretaries wept, and the walls seemed to close in tighter with every hour. Outside, Berlin burned. Inside, denial and madness ruled. It was history retold as psychological thriller, and audiences around the world couldn't look away. Beyond the headlines, Downfall reshaped cinema's responsibility to history. It proved that German filmmakers could stare into the darkest corner of their past without flinching, and it asked every viewer a chilling question. What does it look like when evil collapses? Not in glory, but in despair. Even now, echoes of Downfall linger. From internet memes to history classrooms, its shadow stretches far beyond the screen. It's not just a film, it's a confrontation, and one that refuses to fade. So there you have it. 10 German films born from war, rubble, memory, and reinvention. Each one wasn't just cinema. It was a weapon, a mirror, or a warning. From Riefenstahl's soaring cranes to Peterson's submarine claustrophobia. From Staude's rubble-strewn morality plays to Hirschspiegel's descent into the bunker, these films didn't just tell stories. They rewrote the language of film itself. Which one struck you hardest? Which legacy lingers with you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this with a friend who loves cinema history, and don't forget to subscribe for more secrets the screen was never meant to hide. And as always, stay curious, stay sharp, and keep your eyes on the silver screen. The next revelation might already be rolling.